Salutations, respected viewers. This is George Ireland. Here I am at the Mary Rose in Portsmouth. So that is the ship. Probably don't want to see me. I should really get out of the way. But anyway, the Mary Rose was a ship that was commissioned in 1510 by King Henry VIII at a cost of £700. Warships cost slightly more these days. So anyway, it was the flagship of the English Navy. Henry VIII had inherited only 5 warships from his father, Henry VII, but a huge sum of money. Henry VIII was 17 when he came to the throne and was eager to go to war against France. He styled himself King of France. He wanted to make the reality match the theory, and he was very redolent of his namesake, Henry V, who had ruled France, effectively ruled France, less than 100 years before. Well, certainly won the right to it. It's Henry VI who briefly ruled it. We'll go into that. So this was to conquer France. And indeed, it did sterling service. It fought at the Battle of Brest off the coast of France, which was an English naval victory, because Henry VIII quickly went to war against France, the War of the Holy League, with the papacy on his side. Pope Julius II, the warrior pope, was on his side, as was Spain. Part of his marrying Catherine of Aragon in 1509 was this military alliance. But anyway, fast forward to 1545. This is the 3rd war against France, mostly fairly unsuccessful. So yes, the English had some technical victories, but for the loss of tens of thousands of men and the expenditure of vast sums of money, they'd gained only tiny amounts of land, just pimples on the backside of France. Towns like Tournai, which is briefly represented in the English Parliament. But back to the Mary Rose. July 1545, Henry VIII learnt that the French were planning to invade, so he massed his troops here, the navy was here, and the French fought a naval battle on the Solent. That's the sea in between Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. It's only about 10 miles across. So Henry VIII was watching from Southsea on a throne on a hill, and this mighty warship fired a broadside at the French. And there were so many heavy cannon on this one that the broadside was so powerful that it knocked the Mary Rose over. A gust of wind hit at the same time, and it capsized because there were gun ports on either side, and seawater came in, and the ship went down in front of the king's disbelieving eyes. Of the 500 men with the complement of the ship, only 35 of them lived to tell the tale. We know the names of 3 of them, so that was that. Nevertheless, the French were beaten off with minimal losses. They briefly controlled the Isle of Wight, and they were driven off by the militia there. So really it was an English victory. So although the flagship had gone down to Davy Jones's locker, the French had not succeeded. The invasion had been successfully repelled. Henry VIII died a year and a half later. I don't think it was of a broken heart. But he named this ship Mary Rose after his sister Mary, and indeed the Blessed Virgin Mary. Rose for the Tudor Rose. 1485, 22nd of August that year, the Battle of Bosworth, his father, Henry VII, had defeated Richard III, so the Yorkists had the White Rose, the Lancastrians had the Red Rose. The Wars of the Roses came to an end, and then Henry VII married Elizabeth of York, thereby uniting the Lancastrian and Yorkist dynasties, creating the Tudor dynasty, and they have an intertwined red and white rose, concentric red, white layers. So that's why this ship is the Mary Rose. And indeed, Henry VIII's eldest daughter, Mary Tudor, she was called that as well, though she wasn't born until 1516, sometime after this ship was launched. So anyway, it's very well preserved. Astonishingly, in 1536, some men used a diving bell to go down and recover some things. Even shortly after it sank, people were able to recover the masts. And then the ship was lost. Nobody knew where it was for a long time. It was located again in the 1970s. 1975, the Royal Navy started diving very extensively, collected more artifacts. The Prince of Wales, he was a Royal Naval officer. He dove as well and viewed it. And then there was a very ambitious project, this is 1978, and a charitable trust set up with the objective of raising the Mary Rose. It seemed incredible. But anyway, very extensive dives were made and studies were made, and they managed to construct a huge contraption around it, rather like a cage. And very slowly it was raised and brought into Portsmouth Harbour, brought here to a dry dock, and then there's some live television footage of when it was being raised by Dr. Rule, the archaeologist who was in charge, and she's commentating on saying, it's a damn strong ship. And just as she says that, there's a huge crash as the hull breaks. But anyway, it's fairly well preserved, only about half of it's rotted away, considering it sank over 440 years before it was raised. That's good going. because the mud and the seawater preserved it. So it was brought here. They took great care to have seawater constantly flowing over it. They thought otherwise it'd rot away. And finally in 2016 they found a way of preserving it without seawater. So now there's no seawater. You can see it, we can't actually walk on it. Many artifacts. They've studied 197 skeletons from the crew, discovered that the mean average height was 5'7", which is only a little bit shorter than the average these days, 5'9". So it somewhat dispels the myth that people were very short in the 16th century. They were a little bit short, unless these sailors were unusually tall, but they selected for their height. What's something else they found out is that some of them were archers, and often their spines are a bit curved from constantly pulling very strongly on the bowstrings. And the youngest mariner aboard was 10, the oldest was 40. Lifespan being shorter back then, and obviously there was more wear and tear on the human bodies. People had very demanding physical jobs back then. So you can see the cannon and so on. If there were an unusual number of cannon on this ship, there would have been fewer, because boarding the enemy ship and capturing it that way, that was the thing. One of the reasons why so few sailors survived was anti-boarding nets on the Mary Rose, which made escape even more difficult. So that was that. It's astonishing to view. Shows how good this hand craftsmanship was in bygone centuries, that half a ship can sort of survive so long, and the trauma of being raised from the depths. And I suppose it's a tribute to all those sailors who have no known grave but the sea, because they're all down at Davy Jones's locker. So that's in Portsmouth, headquarters of the Royal Navy. Strongly recommended to visit. £16 for adults, 14 concessions, half price for children. You'd have a family ticket, 1 add-on, 3 children, £25, things like that. Open almost every day of the year. So don't miss it. Little audio visual, lots of displays, and there's some guides on tour who'll tell you all about the Mary Rose. They don't give the prefix HMS anymore, His Majesty's ship. Perhaps they should do. Henry VIII, King of Ireland. They're much better known as King of England. He was only King of Ireland from 1542, when our Parliament hailed him as the Irish monarch. I shall switch it off now.